لله منشي الخلق من عدم ثم الصلاة على المختار في القدم مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم أمن تذكر جيران بذي سلم أمن تذكر جيران بذي سلم مزجت دمعا جرى من مقلة بدمي.
Middle East Report on Sabahul Muslim.
Well, 7:45 a.m. You're listening to Sabah al-Muslim right here on the airwaves of Radio Islam International, live from Durban, KZN. Well, Middle East Report up next, and let's see what's happening in that neck of the woods. And good day, James Dorsey.
Good morning. Pleasure to be with you.
Thank you for joining us once again, James, on this Friday morning for us. James, starting off our discussion with Qatar. Now, the World Cup to take place, the Football World Cup, towards the end of the year. Qatar having prepared for that, and the preparations started a while back. But there are a number of questions, regarding this bid of Qatar. And these questions are not recent questions. They've been around for a couple of years. There was the bidding fair, and that was a cloud hanging and still continues to hang over Qatar, as well as the treatment of workers that are building those massive concrete stadiums. The question also belies us, James, that this boost to the economy, which supposedly the World Cup would inject into Qatar, is this sustainable? Are all these massive buildings, these stadiums, going to be sustainable for the economy of Qatar going forward?
That's the $64,000 question. What is certainly true is that the World Cup has given, and this year will give, Qatar a significant economic boost beyond, of course, gas exports and so on, particularly because you have huge infrastructure projects going on that have either just been finished or are being finished. That has meant the import of a significant number of migrant labor, but also a significant number of professionals, project managers, engineers, and so forth. And the World Cup itself, the Qataris are expecting 1 million visitors. So the World Cup itself at the end of the year will boost revenues. The question is, can you sustain that? Or are you going to see some degree of contraction as you need less construction workers because you finished the construction of the infrastructure, and there are going to be less professionals. And in addition to that, are you going to be able to utilize not only just stadiums, but also, for example, an almost brand new city that is or has been built, Lusail? And so the probable answer to the question is, no, you won't be able to sustain that kind of, or those sectors in that fashion. But overall, the Qatari economy probably will still do well.
Moving on to the conflict, Russia-Ukraine. Now, at the beginning of that conflict, James, we've seen a number of countries taking a fence-sitting approach. I think South Africa would fall in that category as well. But then you saw old allies of the US and NATO, the UAE and Saudi Arabia in particular, adopting that position of wait and see. Is the time, is the clock ticking down on them that they need to choose a position position and come out clear in light of various deteriorating relations that Russia has now, shown to a number of Middle Eastern countries, that they need to come clear and clean as to, do we continue to sit on the fence, or are we on one side or the other?
I think, first of all, the risks for Saudi Arabia and the UAE are in some ways far greater than for other fence-sitters, possibly like South Africa, for the very simple reason Saudi Arabia and the UAE at the bottom line cannot defend themselves. They need a security guarantor. There's only one guarantor. That's the United States. It's not Russia. It's not China. And therefore, sitting on the fence could very well have a cost, because the Americans won't forget that. Now, having said that, the ability in my mind to sit on the fence is becoming smaller. And I think what one has to look at is the relationship between Israel and Russia. Israel, like the UAE and Saudi Arabia, did not forcefully condemn Russia, has not imposed U.S. and European sanctions. But the relationship between Israel and Russia has deteriorated in recent weeks significantly, with the Russians taking umbrage at Israeli statements, making a point of telling the public that it was Russian anti-missile batteries that knocked down an Israeli missile over Syria recently, making claims in terms of a church in Jerusalem, as well as support for the Palestinians with regard to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. All of that should be telling the fence-sitters that you can buy time for a certain period of time, but ultimately this is going to be you're with us or against us.
James, staying in Saudi Arabia now, we've seen the Biden administration, as we had spoken about a week or two before, not wanting to have much to do with MBS and preferring the older senior members of the Saudi royal family of the hierarchy, the father in particular. But in recent days, we've seen a possible mending in relations between the Saudi and between Saudi Arabia and the USA by the visit by the CIA chief and the nomination of a new U.S. ambassador to the kingdom. I mean, talk to us about these latest diplomatic moves by the U.S. in relation to Saudi Arabia.
Well, indeed, Saudi Arabia in some ways, again, is a special case among the fence-sitters, if you wish, because of the person of Mohammed bin Salman and the killing in 2018 of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. That has resulted in the U.S. not wanting to talk to Mohammed bin Salman himself, and of course that made that a big issue for MBS, Mohammed bin Salman personally. The U.S., because it wants more Saudi oil on the market, appears to have addressed that by sending recently the CIA chief Burns to Saudi Arabia, where he met with Mohammed bin Salman, and basically established contact at a senior level between the kingdom and the Biden administration. And it's now appointed, he has to still be approved by Parliament, but appointed a career diplomat as ambassador to Saudi Arabia. It may very well be that Saudi Arabia is already privately shifting. If one looks very closely at the way Saudi Arabia prices oil for different markets, you can see a bit of a price advantage being given at the moment to Europe, which very well could mean that the Saudis very quietly, without breaking ranks with OPEC or wanting to publicly state that they have changed their policy, are redirecting oil shipments to Europe at a time that it wants to reduce its dependency on Russia.
Finally, James, the nuclear situation out there in the Middle East. Now, the Iranian nuclear agreement seems to, be at a breaking stage. Renewal of that agreement, of course, in the talks, and there is some movement over there. But is this going to trigger some sort of a nuclear arms race in the Middle East with the rivals of Iran, namely Saudi Arabia, who's got the money, and the UAE, who's already got a small domestic program running as well, and maybe Qatar as an investor, a side investor, now wanting to also up their ante in the nuclear field?
The negotiations to revive the 2015 international agreement that curbed Iran's nuclear program are seemingly at a make-or-break phase. And the real remaining issue at the moment is whether or not the United States should take the Revolutionary Guards off its terrorism list. Now, if the negotiations fail, then nothing stops Iran to further develop its nuclear program, possibly with a military aspect to it. And that obviously is going to provoke other countries. You've already had a public figure who's not in government but very close to government in the UAE tweet earlier this week in response to closer relations the UAE and Saudi Arabia have forged with Pakistan, or repaired those relations, that it's time to put the nuclear issue at the top of the agenda. Similarly, Saudi Arabia has said that is putting building blocks for a military nuclear program as part of its civilian nuclear program in place, and it's doing that within the limits of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And Turkey has in the past said that if everybody else is going to arm themselves with nuclear weapons, so are they. So if the Iran agreement fails, you almost certainly will have a nuclear arms race.
James Dorsey, thank you so much for joining us, as always, on this Friday, nearly weekend day, with the Middle East report. And have yourself a good couple of days ahead, James.
Thank you. And
as James Dorsey with the Middle East report and what's coming out of that part of the dunya, that part of the world. A few minutes it is from our side before 8 o'clock, alhamdulillah, on this Yawmul Jummah. If you're heading off to work, alhamdulillah, do so with the niyat and the intention. You'll go early to the masjid today. All those good habits, alhamdulillah, that were inculcated during the month of Ramadan, tilawat of Quran before, you'll attempt to sustain it, and there'll be a level of consistency. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all tawfiq to be consistent, even though our a'mal, our actions beyond our faraid, of course, faraid, no concession there, but anything beyond that, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us consistency and ikhlas and sincerity. Ameen. Few minutes it is before 8 o'clock. I'll join you the other side of 8.